Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Reports that a second US aircraft carrier is on its way to the Middle East as Trump weighs up military action on Iran. The BNP win a landslide victory in the Bangladeshi elections following the Gen Z uprising. And rolling back on major climate change policies, Trump ditches the Obama-era greenhouse gas ruling, promising cheaper cars for American consumers. It is believed a second US aircraft carrier is being sent to the Middle East as President Trump considers possible military action against Iran. The New York Times reports the USS Gerald R. Ford will put two carriers and their warships in the region as the US ramps up pressure on Iran to make a deal on its nuclear program. The world's largest aircraft would join the USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier and three guided missile destroyers who have been in Middle East waters for the past fortnight. Let's speak to Professor of Political Science and International Relations, University of Southern California, Derek Grossman. Derek, great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me. Derek, could the deployment of an additional US aircraft carrier to the Middle East strengthen Trump's diplomatic leverage, or does it increase the danger of escalation?
Well, great to be with you again. And I think the answer is it certainly increases the chance for escalation. But at the same time, the Trump administration, as we've seen over the last few weeks, has been pursuing diplomacy. They just had some meetings over Iran's nuclear program in Oman. And so I think it's fair to say that the United States is pursuing a multi-pronged strategy or approach. You know, sometimes people wonder whether Trump actually has a strategy, right? But at least it's some sort of an approach to Iran, which is to try to extend an olive branch, but also to brandish American military might by sending the Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier, as you mentioned, to join the Abraham Lincoln there. And so there's a little bit of both. There's some deterrence, there's some engagement. And I think when I was listening to President Trump's statement yesterday, and he said that it's going to be traumatic if Iran does not comply with U.S. demands, which is to cease harassing and executing protesters and also to begin rolling back its nuclear program. And he laid out a timeline of about a month. So we are in we are in a situation now where things seem to be ramping up more so than pursuing diplomacy.
And Derek, just a few days ago, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu did hold a meeting with Trump at the White House. How significant were these talks in shaping the US position on negotiations with Iran? Because like you said to me right now, the US appears to be pursuing diplomacy.
Yeah, so Trump has met with Netanyahu many times, I believe the most times of any foreign leader. And so they know each other very well, of course, stretching back to his first administration. And in my view, Netanyahu certainly does not want the U.S. to be negotiating with Iran. He wants more of a hawkish approach toward Iran. He wants to see more threats militarily. Netanyahu, I mean, very much appreciated the U.S. bombing Iranian nuclear sites over the summer. The thing about it is, Trump is, as he said many times, is beholden to nobody, to no foreign leader. And when he was asked a direct question yesterday about how Netanyahu viewed his diplomacy with Iran, he said, well, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, I don't really care what Netanyahu thinks, and we're going to continue to do this. Right. And so I think yesterday's meeting was really about trying to level set and have both leaders lay out their positions. And I think there is an agreement to disagree. But nonetheless, the U.S.-Israel alliance is very strong, and they will continue down this path of trying to figure out what to do with Iran together.
And let's talk a little bit more about Iran, because the government is actually now putting together what I can understand is this fact-finding committee to investigate the recent protest. What can we actually expect from this report? And Derek, in your opinion, do you think it will be transparent?
Well, I mean, if past is present, right, then, I mean, we have to figure that this report is not going to be honest. It may be transparent in some sense, but it will certainly favor the regime and how the regime has handled the protesters. And, you know, it will likely refer to them as secessionists or as terrorists that are instigated by foreign powers, to include the United States and Israel. So I don't expect much out of it. And I also think that it is a way of Iran signaling to the United States, look, we're doing something. And so that will, from Tehran's perspective, hopefully let some of the air out of the sails here that are heading toward war. But I doubt that it will actually be a genuine effort. That said, it may be enough for Trump. Trump has not really been so keen on human rights and democracy in this second term. He speaks loudly sometimes about it, but usually he doesn't, and usually the issue withers on the vine. And so I wonder if Iran's strategy here might actually work, even if it is a very uncredible type of attempt to appease.
And Derek, I want to move on to another topic that has been dominating the news agenda, and it's Bangladesh. What does the BNP's landslide victory and Tariq Rahman's return from exile mean for the future of Bangladesh's politics? A lot of people have said this is the election really being driven by Gen Z.
Yeah, so I mean, to take you back to August of 2024, I mean, there was a Gen Z uprising against Sheikh Hasina's Awami League government, which really was a regime. It controlled the people. It was very illiberal. There were not free and fair elections. It persecuted opposition members, to include the BNP, right? So the Awami League was banned from this latest election. And Hasina, she has sought refuge in India. She's spoken out about how the election is not free and fair if the Awami League cannot participate. And I think she has a point on that. But at the same time, the election has gone forward and the BNP won in a landslide, I think indicating that the Bangladeshi people have rejected more of the Islamist flavor in their politics, right? So it was the Jamaat-e-Islami party in conjunction with, I think, 11 coalition members, many or most of whom are also Islamist. And so the BNP is, I think, trying to recenter Bangladesh as more of a secular nation, but more of a nationalist nation that is not really obligated to do anything for anybody else other than Bangladesh. The Awami League was kind of viewed as very pro-India, and in some cases kind of controlled by India, right? And so BNP, I think, is going to try to get back to, you know, forgive me for saying, but like making Bangladesh great again, right? But it really kind of with Bangladeshi characteristics rather than the footprint of anybody else.
Derek Grossman, I wonder where you got making Bangladesh great again. Thank you, as always, for your analysis and for joining the show.
Thank you. Take care.
Now, world leaders are arriving at the Munich Security Conference today as transatlantic ties dominate talks. Much has been made of US Secretary of State Marco Rubio's comments as he prepares for a major speech, warning of a new era in geopolitics. Take a listen.
The world is changing very fast right in front of us. The old world is gone, frankly, the world I grew up in, and we live in a new era in geopolitics. And it's going to require all of us to sort of re-examine what that looks like and what our role is going to be.
We can now get the thoughts of former British MP and Defence and Security Analyst Tobias Ellwood. Tobias, as always, great to have you on the show. So, how will Marco Rubio's speech at the Munich Security Conference signal a new era in US-Europe relations after the Greenland controversy?
Well, good afternoon. And it's really curious listening to Marco Rubio claim that the world is changing around us, as if America has absolutely nothing to do with where the world is today. It's because of what America is doing in retreating from its engagement with Europe, becoming more isolationist, that most of the problems that we face in Europe are there today. Russia is clearly the adversary that's shaking up European security, and America could join in with Europe in putting that fire out, but Trump has been hesitant all along. So for Rubio to turn up, and then I think what's going to happen is lecture the Europeans, as J.D. Vance, if you recall, a year ago did, the vice president, saying the problem isn't Russia, the problem of Europe is within. I suspect we're going to get more of that. And what's fascinating about Marco Rubio is that he was a senator prior to the Secretary of State role in Britain. We knew him well. He visited Parliament on a regular basis. He very much was in favor of the transatlantic relationship, in favor of standing up to Russia, and in favor of supporting Ukraine. And all three of those have now changed.
Yes, indeed. And Tobias, who could forget US Vice President J.D. Vance delivering that highly controversial speech last year? But Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz says we are stronger together. Even the US is not powerful enough to go it alone. He said this today. He was opening the Munich conference. Do you think President Donald Trump would disagree with that statement?
Well, again, it's been fascinating. Well, what a bumpy year this has been. And we're just into February when we saw what Trump did in Venezuela, but then this claim of Greenland. And for the first time, I was pleased to see European partners standing up to say that is not going to happen. After the first year of Trump's office, where leader after leader went bended knee into the Oval Office saying, please, please, stay with us in Europe, support us in what we're doing in Ukraine and pushing Russia back. And of course, Trump was completely hesitant, wanting to bring Putin in from the cold. It was the first time in January that we saw European leaders say, right, that's enough. We've had it with this. We're going to actually look after what's important to us. Greenland is not for annexation. We stand with Denmark. And my goodness, Trump had to back off. And I'm hoping that a strong message will come from the Munich Security Conference this time to say, you've got to be with us. And by the way, let's work together, because it's in America's interest for Europe to be strong. There will be an occasion, I'm sure, in the next months or indeed years, where America will be wanting European support again, as it did in Iraq, as it did in Afghanistan. And for Europe to be distracted further by what's going on in Russia because America dials back is not in America's long-term security or indeed even economic interests.
And Tobias, how is the war in Ukraine expected to dominate discussions at the conference? We know President Zelensky has now arrived in Munich today, but you and I have just been discussing this US-Europe relationship.
Well, you asked such an important question, because I recall 4 years ago when Zelensky turned up just before Russian troops invaded his country, pleading to NATO to say, please help me, it's about to happen. And nobody believed it would. And yet here we are, 4 years later, talking about the same war with Russia operationally on the advantage in eastern Ukraine. And that's the sadness of this. We're talking about NATO, the most formidable, most potent military alliance the world has ever seen. And 4 years on, we still haven't put this fire out.
Tobias, my big question is, why hasn't NATO put this fire out? They've had so many opportunities to do it. And Donald Trump has said before that they just have meetings about meetings. So it doesn't appear like NATO's helping itself much.
Well, Donald Trump is part of the problem. It's because he's been courting Putin, wanting to bring him in from the cold, not treating him as an adversary. That's been half the problem. We've not given the weapon systems for Ukraine to do the job properly. And if you recall, every time there was discussion about whether we should slide across another military capability, there was a massive public debate about it. You know, whether we should be offensive or defensive weapons, that was the first one. Tanks, F-16s, long-range missiles, being able to hit missiles or send missiles deep into Russia. Big public debates about it. Each time Putin coming back saying, you dare do that, cross that line, and I might go nuclear. We were spooked the entire time. And we needed a little bit of Cold War statecraft, if I can put it that way, to be able to look our enemy in the eye and say, we're not going to blink.
And Tobias, what role will tensions with China and the Middle East play in this year's security debates that will be happening in Munich?
Well, this is half the problem, is that many of these other issues, important issues that you describe, get pushed to the wayside because we're not talking about adversaries. We're not talking about other conflicts and how to resolve them. We're actually talking about the bun fights, the disagreements within the alliance as well. And that's why this Munich Security Conference indeed is so important, but so worrying that we are where we are today.
Tobias, Ellwood, as always, good to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your thoughts.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. President Trump will meet with the Special Forces soldiers who captured Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro. The troops, who are based at Fort Bragg military base in North Carolina, were part of a sting that resulted in 83 people being killed and more than 100 others injured. The suspect in Nancy Guthrie's kidnapping case has been identified as a 5'9" or 5'10" male with an average build, wearing a black 25-litre Ozark Trail hiker backpack. The FBI has also doubled the reward to $100,000 for a tip-off that leads to an arrest and a conviction. President Trump will announce a multi-billion-dollar reconstruction plan for Gaza at the Board of Peace meeting next week. Trump, who hopes to raise Gaza's gross domestic product to $10 billion by 2035, will also present a plan for a UN-authorized stabilization force during the meeting in Washington, D.C. 4 astronauts have traveled towards the International Space Station after a successful launch by NASA and SpaceX. The crew aboard the SpaceX Dragon spacecraft will spend 8 months in space and will replace a team that evacuated the station last month due to a medical emergency. And over 100 couples tied the knot yesterday in Peru's first collective civil wedding of the year. The ceremony, organized by the municipality of Lima, took place at the iconic Magic Circuit of Water, where newlyweds posed for photos, exchanged rings, and celebrated with cake and music. President Trump has revoked a landmark ruling regarding the emission of greenhouse gases. It reverses a former policy introduced by the Obama administration, which controlled all federal action on curbing planet-warming gases. It's been called the largest regulation in American history by the White House, who say this action will make cars cheaper. Here's how President Trump broke that very news.
Under the process just completed by the EPA, we are officially terminating the so-called endangerment finding, a disastrous Obama-era policy that severely damaged the American auto industry and massively drove up prices for American consumers. That is why, effective immediately, we are repealing the ridiculous endangerment finding and terminating all additional green emission standards imposed unnecessarily on vehicle models and engines between 2012 and 2027 and beyond. We canceled the EPA's absurd, just totally absurd, tailpipe emission standards, which was a disaster for automobile manufacturing, and revoked Biden's emissions waiver that would have allowed California to regulate automobiles for the entire nation.
Let's go live to Washington now to speak to our correspondent, Sara Firth. Sarah, does this come as a surprise? Trump has consistently expressed skepticism about human-driven climate change, calling it a hoax and a green scam.
Yes, Leigh-Ann, it's not really a surprise because, as you said, this is the president who's referred to climate change repeatedly in the past as a hoax. President Trump has long taken the stance that climate change regulation is harmful to the American consumer. It drives up prices. So there's no change in his position there. What's unique is the scale of the potential consequences of what we've now seen the president and his administration do, which is revoke this scientific finding, the endangerment finding. And what that was, as you said, back in 2009, under the Obama administration, the Environmental Protection Agency came to the conclusion that certain greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide were harmful to public health. Now that formed the legal underpinning, if you like, for federal regulation of, for example, things like car emissions. So you can see a really busy road behind me here going into Washington, D.C. Now, as of right now, the rules governing those emissions, they remain in place. But what the announcement from Trump with this reversal of the endangerment finding means is that that legal basis has now been weakened, can potentially be challenged. And so you've got the consequences of this decision potentially quite far-ranging. And those critics of it saying this is a major blow in the fight against climate change.
And Sarah, what does this decision mean in practical terms? Does it now limit the government's ability to regulate emissions from cars, power plants, and also industry?
Yes, it does. I mean, a good example is the cars. So you've got the really busy road behind me. What you had with that endangerment finding, as I said, is that became the legal underpinning for bringing in regulations and rules around the types of emissions that cars are allowed to put out. Now, nothing is going to change immediately, but it does mean that those rules are now at risk. And so you've got critics of this decision coming out saying this is a major blow to the fight. President Obama himself, it's quite rare for him to step in and comment on these types of decisions. But Leigh-Ann, I'm going to read you what he said because it was strong wording from former President Barack Obama. He said that the ruling had served as the basis for the limits for things like tailpipe emissions from cars and power plant rules. Without it, Barack Obama says, we'll be less safe, less healthy, less able to fight climate change.
And how has this been viewed in Washington? And what does it mean for global efforts to tackle climate change? Will this have a ripple effect to other governments who've been making this effort to try and curb the use of fossil fuels? Because we know Donald Trump said, drill, baby, drill. He's a big fan of the fossil fuels, Sarah.
Yes, Leigh-Ann, drill, baby, drill, and his clean, beautiful coal. Look, again, this is very much a stance that we've seen President Trump take throughout the course of his presidency, indeed throughout the course of the first time he was in office. Look, the administration is arguing here that this move is going to eliminate $1.3 trillion, they say, of regulatory costs, bring down prices for consumers. So presumably, when you look at cars, if some of those rules around emissions regulation are challenged without that legal underpinning now, you can potentially have prices driven down perhaps for the cars. But the impact of that, climate defenders say, goes far beyond simply this fight against climate change. You know, America in the global standing under many previous administrations from both parties has been a leading champion of fighting climate change. Obviously, that has been markedly different under President Trump. But what people are saying here in Washington is very divided along party lines. You've got Republicans supportive of this move. You know, you had he was standing alongside the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency. He'd gone on to say, look, this is the single biggest act of deregulation in the United States of America. He called the Obama-era policy an ideological crusade. But Leigh-Ann, those who defend climate change are saying this is a signal to the world of America not just fighting back against these climate change regulations, but seriously challenging the consensus, right, that greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide and the likes of car emissions behind me shouldn't be regulated and that they cause people harm. That is a major stance for the world's global power to be taking.
And it's really interesting because Donald Trump has pulled out a lot out of these climate accords, like the Paris Climate Accord that we did see. This is something that Donald Trump tends to do. He pulls out of things he doesn't agree with. And I wonder now, what could the health implications be on the system in America, which is already quite a difficult healthcare system when it comes to insurance?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really important point, Leigh-Ann. And you've got the environmental regulators here. I mean, it is just pages, basically, from all types of protection agencies saying about the damage this can potentially do. Now, it's really important to point out to viewers, as we said, you don't currently have the rules, for example, around the emissions from the cars behind me here on a busy road into the Capitol, but removing that endangerment finding, right? So that finding that back in 2009 under Obama, the Environmental Protection Agency said, we've done the investigation, we have concluded that the gases, certain types of greenhouse gases, are a serious threat to public health. And that meant that all the other rules around, for example, tailpipe emissions, they were based upon this regulation. So when you've removed this, you've got the fight against climate change essentially just becoming that much harder. The rules for now are in place, but this has made it much easier, for example, car manufacturers to challenge. And that is a real concern for climate change campaigners. And again, they're saying this isn't just a potential wide-ranging consequences here in the United States. So if you have the regulations around tailpipe emissions lifted, it's not just the various states that will be impacted. That pollution, of course, can impact, it travels. It can impact many other states as well. But it's also, as they pointed out, a signal to the rest of the world about just where this administration stands when it comes to climate change. So again, to go back to the fact President Trump has called this a hoax, well, he's now putting the administration's money where his mouth is, repealing this very important endangerment finding that climate change environmentalists are saying is going to be a major blow in the climate change fight.
And you know, Sarah, something quite interesting that I've seen a lot of analysts been writing about in the last few weeks or so is they're saying that the Trump administration almost seems to be anti-science when it comes to climate change, anti-science when it comes to things like vaccinations. And Donald Trump is making that quite clear. I don't know if you've seen anything on that or have thoughts on the administration's way forward, as you just said.
Yeah, I mean, Leigh-Ann, you're absolutely right. And look, the endangerment finding itself, it all sounds very technical, but when it comes down to it, that finding was saying that greenhouse gases, so carbon dioxide, methane gas, that they pose a threat to human health and welfare. They were very clear about that. Now, the fact that you had the Environmental Protection Agency, the government agency in 2009, come out and make that ruling meant that you then had the legal basis for all the other rules. So where people wanted to look at something like car emissions, they had that endangerment finding to back them up legally. And that is now gone. So it endangers all the rules. This wasn't just President Trump going after individual rules when it comes to climate change policy. This is him going right to the heart of the foundation that brought about that policy. And so again, you take the traffic moving behind me here, they're going into central DC. This road's always super busy. They are subject to emission standards right now. And those standards are built on that 2009 endangerment ruling. Well, that's now been removed by President Trump. And so it's a step toward lifting the regulations that cars like the ones behind me now have. And so you can see potentially the impact of that. This is President Trump and his administration going head to head up against that scientific consensus that greenhouse gases do people harm. They're saying not only do they not agree with that, President Trump calling it a hoax, they've now taken this very significant step that sends a major message to the world about where they stand on climate change.
Sara Firth, absolutely fascinating. Keep safe on that road. Thank you so much for joining us. Now to the Korean Peninsula, where authorities say they believe North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has officially nominated his daughter as successor of the regime. The claims come as North Korea prepares to host its 9th Congress at the end of this month. Jan David has this report.
A secretive regime, large military parades, and now a successor. In recent years, daughter of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, Ju-ae, has been increasingly seen by her father's side. South Korea's Parliamentary Intelligence Committee now say they believe she has officially been selected to inherit control. Considering all that presence is increasingly becoming more prominent domestically, and that she's giving her direct opinions on some policies during her on-site inspections, we can say it's somewhat unusual that the expression used was that she was in the stage of being internally appointed successor, from that she was in study as successor. It's notoriously difficult to get information out of North Korea. Thought to be in her early teens, even the successor's real age is unknown. But it's photos like this that offer a rare glimpse inside the secretive state, and have pushed South Korean representatives to make the succession claims. Kim's daughter has been spotted drawing submarines, missiles, and military installations. She's now thought to be increasingly involved in Pyongyang's policy matters. The development comes as North Korea pushes to modernize its military, say South Korean representatives.
North Korea is also focusing on diversifying its platforms, including nuclear submarines and destroyers.
Earlier this month, leader Kim called for the military to broaden its power. The end of February will see the state's ruling party convene for its 9th Congress. All eyes are on whether Ju-ae appears by her father's side. Jan David, Arabiya English.
Let's take a look at the top sports news now. Atletico Madrid produced an outstanding first-half display against La Liga leaders Barcelona, scoring 4 goals in the Copa del Rey semi-final. This was the second time they had met at this stage of the competition, with Barcelona winning last year. And my favourite sports story of the day, Zimbabwe remain undefeated in the T20 World Cup as they won by 23 runs against Australia in Colombo. The loss leaves the Aussies 2 points behind the Southern African team and Sri Lanka. It's day 7 of the Milan Cortina 2026 Winter Olympics, with athletes around the world gathering in Italy for a chance of a medal. Currently, Norway top the table with 8 golds, whilst the host nation are second with 6. But it's still all up for grabs, with plenty more events to come today and, of course, this weekend. And here to tell me all about this is 3-time Olympic speed skater and owner of Raw Fitness, Sarah Lindsay. She joins me right here in the studio. Sarah, it's so great to have you on the show. It's been quite the week when it comes to the Winter Olympics, I must say. What's been your highlight of the first week?
I really loved watching Jutta Leerden win the 1,000 metres. So the Dutch long track skater, she won the 1,000, and she was so emotional, and she has such a huge profile, millions of followers, and I think a really good role model for youngsters. You know, there's lots of younger people watching on social media, and I think you don't get to win an Olympic gold medal in long track skating without having a real, just a real strong work ethic.
It's quite amazing, isn't it, how far and how much you have to train, as you do know. Absolutely. And you competed for Team GB, of course. And it's been no medals on the table for GB. I've been watching and I've been hoping. Could we see them grab a medal anytime soon, possibly?
They just haven't quite pulled it out the bag yet, have they? No. But there's loads left to go. And we're getting to the stage of the Olympics now where the medals start to come in. There's been lots of qualifying rounds and heats of different races, but now we're starting to see the medal races happen. So tonight we've got Matt Weston in the skeleton, which he's gone in, he's done 2 track records, not 1, but 2. So, yeah, good hopes for him.
And what I also think is the curling always gets people very excited when it comes to Team GB. Any hopes of a medal there, possibly?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think they're just trying to keep us on the edge of our seats because they're going in really strong. They've already beaten Sweden, who are the leaders. And we did lose today against Italy, but it doesn't matter. We go in tomorrow to the next round, so we've still got lots of hope.
Oh, fingers crossed,
yes,
definitely.
Fingers crossed.
And let's talk about Chao Gayon, who became the first South Korean female athlete to win gold. And this was a surprise. She snatched it from the young American, who, of course, got that 4 years ago.
Yeah, well, this is Korea's first snow medal ever.
Wow.
And she's only 17 years old, and she fell in the first two legs, and she injured herself as well. She injured herself in the first round, and then she just saved it all for the third, I think, and absolutely smashed it.
Incredible,
Yeah.
isn't it?
There's lots more to see from her.
Yeah, that will be really interesting. We'll have to wait to see how that all happens. And what about the French ice skaters? Because I've been hearing a lot about them. They've been causing a bit of a stir on social media. They won gold, but they actually haven't been appearing for a very long time. And there's been some controversy, hasn't there, about them beating the US team and how the points were counted. But what do we know?
There's a few people who have disagreed with the points, for sure. And they, like you said, they haven't been together very long. So they've both been athletes their entire lives, but they've only been together since January 25, so just last year. And she didn't even get French citizenship until November. So she wasn't eligible to even compete for France until November. So, and I think with this sport, there's so much intricacy. There's so much chemistry, every look, every move, every feel. So to have that and to win gold when only being together for such a short amount of time is quite incredible.
And you can't buy chemistry, can you? And
Absolutely.
I think when you watch them, they definitely have it. And that's something so lovely. And also, there's been a lot in the news when it comes to the Winter Olympics off, you know, where they are competing. And give us an update on this Ukrainian skeleton racer. He was disqualified, of course, for featuring images of fallen athletes on his helmet. He's now appealed that decision. He obviously, very sadly, couldn't compete because of that decision. What more do we know?
It's really, really unfortunate, and I think he's been extremely brave to take this stance, knowing that he would be disqualified. So he was pre-warned that if he wore this helmet, he was allowed to wear it in other areas, but just not in the actual state of play, so not in his race. But he decided that that was more important to him than his Olympic race. So to sacrifice that for a cause that is bigger than sport, ultimately. So, yeah, very, very brave of him. He has appealed to the Court of Arbitration. But even if this gets overturned, and I really do hope that it does, he still won't be competing. I think it will just be more of a statement rather than being actually able to compete, because the competition has already advanced, so they won't rerun the Olympics. But I think taking away his accreditation, which has been reinstated, but stopping him from being trackside and being able to support his teammates, I think is extremely unfair.
And it's so interesting, isn't it, how politics plays into sport. And we always have that debate when it comes to every Olympics that they should be kept separate. But we've clearly seen this here.
It's a huge platform. It's this huge platform for these people. And like you said, it's an extremely important issue, and to him, more important than winning a medal.
Fascinating. And the story that I think I loved the most this week is the Norwegian biathlete who obviously came out and he had confessed that he had cheated on his girlfriend. He cried, begged for forgiveness, and the whole world was like, what's happening? What more do we know?
I mean, she should run for the hills. Absolutely run for the hills. Well, she made an anonymous statement back, actually, saying that she didn't choose to be put into the limelight. She didn't want that. I mean, he's humiliating her on a global scale. What was he thinking? And also detracting attention away from his teammate that actually won the gold medal.
And that's what I was thinking about. All of this, what does that mean for his team? Does it put them in an awkward situation too?
Well, it means that his teammate didn't get the limelight and recognition that he would have deserved. On that day, he wins Olympic golds, and everybody's talking about this guy cheating on his girlfriend.
I mean,
what's it got to do with the Olympics?
And I also thought that, like, has he gone a bit mad? Like, what's actually happened here?
I don't think it was a smart move. Well, he's since apologised for doing all that in the first place, but, you know, too little, too late.
And just a final thought, what you're looking forward to watching this weekend coming? What should we all be watching on our screens?
Well, I'll be watching Matt Weston tonight in the skeleton
So
because
I looked at the skeleton and you
Yes.
go 80 kilometres per hour, head first. What possesses people to do that?
I mean, it is white knuckle stuff.
Yeah.
Head first, that kind of speed, just on a tray with no protection around you. I mean, it really is daredevil. I mean, the Winter Olympics, so much of it is extreme sport. But yeah, they're incredible, really fast, really powerful athletes. So Matt Weston for sure. And then tomorrow we have my sport, short track speed skating. The men's 1500 goes all the way through to the final event, so to the gold medal race. And we have our British athlete in there, Niall Tracy. So I'll be watching and cheering him on as well.
OK, I will definitely watch those. I know the skeleton just seems absolutely mad. But thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Sarah Lindsay, great to have you on the show. A reminder of our top stories. Reports that a second US aircraft carrier is on its way to the Middle East as Trump weighs up military action on Iran. The BNP win a landslide victory in the Bangladeshi elections following the Gen Z uprising. And rolling back on major climate change policies, Trump ditches the Obama-era greenhouse gas ruling, promising cheaper cars for American consumers. That's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Of course, follow us on X. Goodbye and happy Valentine's Day tomorrow.